All right, I'm Kevin Nelms, NRCS wildlife biologist, and I'm doing the wildlife portion of the Envirothon training today. A couple things I like to tell you about Envirothon is there's two parts to the test. There's a written portion that's multiple choice and a hands-on portion. I'll be teaching the hands-on portion today. The written part is there's objectives of what you need to know. There's some definitions that you need to know that go along with those objectives. There's a handout that I put together for that. So you can look at the handout. We're not covering that. You need to study that yourself. If you don't study that and understand those terms and understand those objectives, you're not going to do well on the written part. I'm going to cover the hands-on part and teach you kind of how to make educated guesses. This is a lot of material to cover. I can't cover everything to where you absolutely know something. But what I do is I break it down to where you're making very educated guesses. And through those educated guesses, you should be getting the hands-on material correctly. Now, there's some things that we're just not covering today because it's hard to do in a setting like this, and that's animal sounds, bird calls, frog sounds, those kind of things. In the handout, there's resources that you can go to and listen to that kind of stuff yourself. This stuff that I'm going to show, I'm covering furs, I'm covering skulls, I'm covering wings, I'm covering tracks. There's also resources that you can go to on the internet and look at those kind of things as well. So you'll have this to look at, and you'll also have other resources. Go to those resources or you're not going to do well on the Envirothon test. There's also a second handout that is all the species that you should know, broken down by these are the species that you should know their calls or their sounds. These are the species that you should know their tracks. So look at that, know those species, know what the tracks look like, the pelts, whatever. And it tells you in that handout, hey, we can show you pictures, we can show you taxidermy mounts. So be familiar with all that stuff. Look at the handouts. Know what might be coming at you. The other thing I always like to point out is two things. This is Mississippi Envirothon. You're going to get Mississippi native species. That's what's on the handout. You're not going to be asked to identify a lion track or something like that. That's not a Mississippi animal. In Mississippi, we have black bears. We don't have grizzly bears. You won't see a grizzly bear skin or a grizzly bear track. You'll see a black bear track. So native Mississippi species, that's what's on the list. Those are the only things you have to know. The other thing is we expect the full common name, and that's what's on that handout list. It is not a whitetail or a deer. It is a white-tailed deer. You're going to use the full name or you're not getting credit for that answer. So that's on the handout. You need to learn those names. It's not a possum. It's a Virginia opossum. That's the correct full name for the species. So with that being said, let's move into starting the hands-on training. We're going to start with furs. So when you're thinking about furs, I break it down into pieces, parts, whatever you want to call it. The first thing with the fur is you need to figure out whether the animal is terrestrial or aquatic, because that helps you get into, okay, there's aquatic species and there's terrestrial species. So the way to do that when we're looking at a fur is you take the fur and you start trying to find the skin. And so if skin is readily found underneath the fur, then the species is terrestrial. If it's really hard to find the skin or you can't find the skin, then it is an aquatic species. Species that live in the water have a lot more fur because they have to stay warm in the water. So that's what you do, is you just really manipulate the skin, the fur, and try to find skin. If you can find a little bit of skin, maybe a crease of skin, then that's an aquatic species, or no skin whatsoever. If you get a terrestrial species, it should be really easy to find a patch of skin. And you see that white skin underneath there, which is really leather now that this skin has been tanned. So a couple of things that maybe I should have started with, you're going to see different kinds of furs, pelts, skins, whatever you want to call them. This one, where the animal has been, the skin has been removed from the animal, is completely open, laying flat. This is what we typically call a pelt or a skin. Then there's what we call a cased fur, where the animal has been removed and the belly hadn't been cut open. This is actually hollow. This is a cased fur or pelt. The difference is a lot of your characteristics like tails and feet and ears and noses and stuff are on your cased furs. So you have a little bit more information. But you can also have just the flat pelts where you probably don't have tails. You definitely don't have feet. Might be a little bit of nose or something left, but not always distinguishing characteristics on these. You might just be given a piece of fur that's been cut out of a pelt or something. And that gets a little bit tougher. But anyway, so first thing, terrestrial or aquatic. Once we figure out whether we've got terrestrial or aquatic, we kind of know a genre of animals we need to be in. The second thing that I want you to look at is shape. So head up, bottom, tail down. If you see this animal, look at this animal, it's got a shape where the butt or the bottom of the animal is larger. That typically lends toward prey or omnivore. A slower animal that's getting eaten by other faster animals. So that helps you think about what animal you might be looking at based on the shape. So shape is the second thing you look at. Take this one right here, head up, tail down, doesn't get real wide at the bottom. So this one is predator. It's chasing other animals, it's faster, it's sleeker. So now we know, okay, we've checked the fur, we can find skin readily, it's a terrestrial predator. So we're in a class of animals there. After we look at the shape and we determine in our head whether it's predator or omnivore or prey, which omnivore and prey kind of are in the same category when we're looking at skins, then we need to think about size. So how big is this animal? This is the total. I've got the head right here. We've still got whiskers attached. We've got holes where the eyes were. We've got a tail and we've got legs hanging down. So the case skin's giving us a lot of information. But even if this were an open pelt, like we will look at some, you still got a size and a shape. It's going to be larger in the bottom hind end if it's a prey species or an omnivore that might be eaten by something else. If it's long and lean, it's a predator. So we're saying this one is a predator. It's long and lean, and it's this size. This is the size of the animal. It's a medium-sized dog size or something like that. In Mississippi, we should now really only be thinking about 4 species that are predators that are this size. We should be thinking about a coyote. We should be thinking about the 2 foxes. And we should be thinking about a bobcat. So we're down to 4 species now. So how do we get down to 1 species? Well, now let's look at color. What's the color? This is gray. The belly can sometimes give you good information. The belly on this one is not completely white. It's speckled or dotted, whatever you want to call it. That's going to give you a lot of information because there's only one species of those 4 that's going to have the speckling on the bottom. But when you've got the full case skin, you know, look at your other things. We've got a tail here. We've got feet. The feet still have the pads. The feet still have the claws. A lot of great characteristics here. We've got a very short tail, a bobbed tail. If you think about a cat, this, you know, a bobtail cat looks like this. The claws on the feet are not sticking out. They're retracted. Cats can retract their claws. Dogs can't. So this is in the cat family. If we think about the dots or the spots on the bottom, we think about the color, we think about the size. We've got to the cat family based on the claws. The tail is giving us tremendous information. This is actually a bobcat, the only cat native to Mississippi. So we're making 100% guess right here. We've got a bobcat skin. If we had a cased or a flat pelt, the bottom would be on there. It would just be split open, and we would see those dots on there or the spots on there. We would know again that's a bobcat. If the tail happened to be on it, we'd know that's a bobcat. So some great distinguishing characteristics right there. Staying in the long and lean predator family, again, head up, tail down, doesn't get real wide at the bottom. So we're in the predators. Not much difference in size than the bobcat we were just looking at, maybe a little bit smaller. So again, I told you 4 species with the bobcat. Now we're down to 3 because we've already seen the bobcat. We know what it looks like. So we should be in the foxes and the coyote. So we look at the size. We've already determined it's a terrestrial. Size and shape and color. We've got a gray color, a lot of red in it. That's telling us a lot about the dog family. You know, is it the 2 foxes are red fox and gray fox? So is it a red fox? Is it a gray fox? It's got both colors in it. We start looking at the other characteristics, the heads here with the nose. There's actually the ears. Generally, the ears are flattened in a skin like this, so you can't tell a lot about it. We've got the feet. The feet have the claws sticking out. They're not retracted, so we absolutely know it's in the dog family. Look at the tail. Got a much bigger tail than the bobcat. You know, we know we're in the fox or the coyote world. So at this size, it could be a really small coyote, but it's probably a fox. The really distinguishing characteristic here, with color, you're probably going to guess that it's a gray fox. It's much more gray than red. And you would be correct because it is a gray fox. But the real distinguishing characteristic between the gray and the red fox is the red fox has a white tip to its tail, and the gray fox does not have that white tip, and we don't have a white tip on the tail. So we know that it's a gray fox. Now, if this were an open skin, there's a lot of red on the belly there, so don't let that fool you. And there's a lot of color variation in these animals. So again, you're making an educated guess. You're making your best guess. And at this point, we had a 50-50 chance of being right. But if we've got the tail, we can know for sure that we've got a gray fox instead of a red fox. So I just told you about the red fox. Let's look at the red fox. A little bit bigger, a lot more red, but again, I told you there's a lot of color variation. Belly is white compared to mostly red on the gray fox. So there's a variation when you're looking at foxes. Again, we've got feet on this one. We can look at the claws. We've got tail on this one. We can look at the tail. And the distinguishing characteristic that I told you a minute ago between gray and red foxes is red fox, no matter what color variation, this fox could be gray and it'd be a red fox because it's got that white tip to its tail. So a great distinguishing characteristic there if you've got all the features. If you don't have all the features, the difference between the red belly and the white belly is really good. That's not always definitive either. So again, educated guesses. Staying in the canine family or the canids, head up, tail down, much bigger animal, our biggest canine. This is the coyote. If we look at the full size of the animal, much bigger than the foxes. Again, we have the feet, so we can look at the nails. We have the tail, but our biggest predator, really this much more omnivorous than the foxes. It is getting a little wider here. Not a true predator. It is an omnivore, but anyway, longer, leaner, because it is as predatory as it is carnivorous. Lot thicker fur than the foxes, but you can still, if you're manipulating it, you can get down and find skin up underneath all this fur. And one thing about aquatics are, if they've got really long fur, which some of them do, some of them have really short fur, it's a lot softer underneath. The guard or the under hair is softer. But anyway, bigger coyote. So we finished all three of our canines and we covered our one cat. All right, moving into our more omnivorous animals or our prey animals. We don't know which. We've manipulated the fur. We found skin in here. We know that it's a terrestrial animal. We look at the full size. Even if it's flat, we can look at it in terms of size and go, okay, that's the size of the animal. What animals should we be thinking about in this size that are native to Mississippi? We've probably only got 2 guesses. We've finished the bobcats. We've taken the foxes out. You know the differences there now. Shape is one of the big differences. We get to looking at color. There's probably only 2 guesses in this size, and that would be possum and raccoon, or the Virginia opossum and raccoon. So if we've got all the other distinguishing characteristics, we can look at the feet. It's got pads, it's got nails, really long nails, long fingers, if you want to call them that. The face is on here. The face will be in a lot of the flattened pelts as well. And we see it's a little distorted because of the way it lays, but it's got the masked face on it like a raccoon does. It's also got the ring tail, if we have the tail. Ring tail is extremely diagnostic of the raccoon. You see that there's not much white on the belly, back and front, or top and bottom, not a lot of color change, not completely white. So this is a raccoon. I told you there was probably only 2 guesses right there. The other one would be the Virginia opossum. This is the Virginia opossum. This one actually doesn't have, it's got legs kind of, but it doesn't have the feet on it. Got a little bit of the face. Some of it's been skinned off. Tail's not there. Opossum has a naked tail. It doesn't have fur on it, so that's a good characteristic if the tail is there. Fur is a lot the same color of the raccoon, but not as dark, and a lot lighter colored on the bottom. Not as much color on the underside as the raccoon. Again, getting broader in the hindquarters, so omnivore or prey. That's the Virginia opossum. All right. This one, not as big in the hindquarters, more toward the side of predator, but still getting somewhat bigger, so there is some omnivorous tendencies. This one is extremely characteristic in color. Whether it's cased like this or whether it's flat, you're going to see the black and white stripe. And most people know this is a skunk. However, this is not just a skunk. This is a striped skunk. And that's the full name that you're going to use to get the answer. Striped skunk can be two stripes, such as this one. It can be one stripe down the middle. We also have spotted skunks in Mississippi, which are pretty hard to come by, which is why I don't have a skin. And the spotted skunk is going to be black or dark colored like this with white spots on it. So that's going to be the difference in the two. So again, full common names, striped skunk. All right, so getting wide in the back end, probably an omnivore or a prey species. We've got a little bit of face on there. We've got some ears, but again, they're laying flat. Size, shape, and then color, extremely gray, white on the bottom. We have the tail here. We've got the tail characteristics. But overall, a much smaller animal than what we've been looking at. So when we get into the smaller prey or omnivore species that are terrestrial, we should really probably be thinking about two families. We should be thinking about the squirrels and the rabbits. This is a gray squirrel. There's a couple of different squirrels. Fox squirrel, gray squirrel, you got groundhogs. There's a couple of different things kind of in this size genre that are terrestrial. So getting you down to an educated guess, this is a gray squirrel. I cannot remember, and you need to look at the handout for this. You might not have to distinguish between gray squirrel and fox squirrel with the skin. I think you do, but I'm not sure, so that's something to look at on your own. But that's a gray squirrel. Fox squirrel comes in about 5 different color phases. They're black, they're white, they're black and white, they're gray, they're red, and they're bigger than this, so they would be slightly bigger. Got a pelt here. It's a terrestrial. So you have to think about this animal in terms of size. Is okay, if we rolled it back up and fit it around the animal, what size is it? So we're talking about an animal about that big around. This is the face end because there's eye holes right here. This is the tail end. So face up, tail down. We got some little pieces where there were legs. There's no feet or anything attached. There's generally not in a pelt. Sometimes the pelt will be entire like this one. Sometimes they'll actually be trimmed to where you're just looking at the skin. They trim them because they're going to make a coat or whatever out of them. They're actually becoming furs at that point. A fur hat, coat, whatever. So if we think about the size, we think about the shape, and you can kind of see that this one is getting bigger in the hindquarters. The face is up. So a prey or a omnivore species. When we think about the size, we should be thinking maybe squirrels, groundhog, rabbits. This is actually a rabbit. It's cottontail rabbit. The tail's actually still on this one. I think, again, you don't have to know between the different rabbit species. You just have to know rabbit for the skins. But again, look at your handout to know that for sure. And go to the other resources. There's some stuff I don't have, like a fox squirrel. I only have one rabbit. Don't have a groundhog, so I don't have every skin out there. All right, so we're going to move into the aquatic species now. You've manipulated these. You found it really hard to find skin compared to the other ones. You can sit here and pull and search all day long, and you may or may not find skin. The terrestrial ones, you're going to find skin really fast. So we look at this one. We've got some eye holes here. So this is up, this is down. There's actually a piece of leg on this one. So definitely getting broader in the hindquarters, since we know this is the face. So this is probably a prey species, an aquatic prey species. So we should really only have two guesses here. We should be guessing in this size. We should be guessing nutria or muskrat. This is really small, so muskrats are smaller than nutria. We're going to go to the muskrat side. And that's what this is. This is a muskrat. I don't have a nutria. Nutria are not native to Mississippi. They're extremely prolific and occur in Mississippi, so they might be on that list. I can't remember if nutria are on it or not. Again, you need to look at your list to know. But that's a muskrat. All right. Got long and lean aquatic species. We've manipulated the fur. It's actually same color on both sides, belly and top. Got a case fur again. There's actually some feet with some nails on here. Size of the animal is this, but the shape is getting us toward predator. Maybe a little bit of omnivorous activity, but this is pretty long and lean, so probably really predatory. Got a big long tail on it. But even if this were opened up, there's really only two aquatic predators we should be thinking about. We should be thinking about the river otter or the mink. River otter is 4 or 5 times bigger than this. River otter is extremely large. They're actually extremely expensive pelts, which is why I don't have one, because they're worth about $400 a piece. So this is a mink. Mink are much smaller. This is actually a large mink. If I was holding up a otter, it would be, this much wider and, this long. So river otter is extremely big. Mink is fairly small, voracious predator. That's a mink skin. All right, another aquatic species. This is actually a trimmed pelt. It's actually made round. There's some of the belly has been trimmed off of it, some of the lighter color belly, so we've got some consistent fur color. This is how they're sold. There actually is some eye holes on this one. There is leg holes where the legs have been pulled through and trimmed off. But still, head up here, tail or hindquarters down there, it's getting bigger in the hindquarters still as we look at it. So this is a prey or a omnivore. If we look at the total size of the animal, we've got basically tip of the head without the nose to where the tail would be. If we stuff the animal back in it, think about it not as flat but as rounded. What size should we be thinking here? This would be extremely large for a nutria, extremely large for a muskrat. It's not the right shape for a river otter or a mink, so we really should only have one guess here, and that is the beaver. And this is a beaver pelt. So easy to get to one species there. And I've gone through the furs that I have, told you how to look at them. We're starting with the body shape, then we're moving to the size, then we're moving to the color, and then we're looking at other distinguishing characteristics when we have them, like tail, feet, noses, heads, faces, whatever. And I forgot to say that we start with the fur, terrestrial or aquatic. How easy is it to find the skin? So that's kind of the way to break down furs, pelts, whatever you want to call them, and get to educated guesses on those species.